Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Kingdom Conversations. And that takes place each Monday night at 8 o'clock p.m. And we're so glad that you have joined us. Those of us who are from the Church of the Everlasting Kingdom are coming off of what has been an extraordinary weekend for our conference Increase 2020. And although we have all Kotech family with us, well, you're our Kotech family, but we have all Kotech family with us here in this particular virtual studio. We're here to talk about a topic that is not foreign to any of us. This is a topic that none of us should consider ourselves to be excluded from, but this is a topic that involves everyone. This is a topic that impacts each and every last one of us, and it is something that none of us can afford to ignore. And so, as you can see, we have our popular, our famous, our beautiful co-host who sits in for Dr. Darrell R. Pulley from time to time. It is just one of the benefits and blessings of being a man's spiritual daughter, that when he can't make it tag, you are it. So Dr. Davina Jones, good evening. Say hello to the people tonight.
Evening and hello to each of you. As always, it is a pleasure to greet you, whether on this platform or another. So delighted to have this opportunity to sit in for my spiritual father and to join Bishop Hector. I think you're my spiritual uncle. And it's just a pleasure to have these conversations, very real conversations, relevant topics, real conversations. We don't hold the punches. We seek to make an impact. And so that I think you will inspire again tonight.
So as you can see, her eloquence is just one of the many reasons as to why she gets to sit in the seat as our guest co-host. So Dr. Jones, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Dr. Jones is no stranger to this. So first, let me start by saying, Dr. Jones, congratulations on the extraordinary moment that you had with Dr. Jill Biden, who I will decree and declare, and speaking into the atmosphere of our future and next First Lady of the United States. Yes, I did it. And so, like you said, we don't hold back the punches. And it was such an extraordinary moment. And so congratulations to you, because that was certainly had to have been a life-changing moment. What was that like for you?
You know, I don't intend to sound cocky by any means, but we prepare for moments like this when you know that you have an assignment to reach people, to encourage people beyond your block. You spend your time being prepared to have those conversations. So it indeed was an honor. Let me say that with all sense of gratitude. It was an honor, and when we host these different guests, particularly in the college space, it is never with the intent to make an endorsement. And so I host both Republicans, Democrats, and people with all different viewpoints, just as we do here in Kingdom Conversations. We don't necessarily invite individuals that are just a part of our network. And so we bring different voices here. And that's what we do in that academic space where I had a chance to host Dr. Biden. And it was just an opportunity to also speak from a higher consciousness. A lot of times when we're public service and others, we just kind of tend to stick with the collective consciousness of what is wrong or what we see to be wrong. So it was an opportunity to speak some peace into the atmosphere, speak some light into the atmosphere, just as we do here in Kingdom Conversations.
Absolutely. And I hope all of you great kingdom citizens heard exactly what the good doctor said. And that is, when you know that destiny is at hand and you are a child of the King, then we should not be surprised, but simply thankful when greatness and great moments and great opportunities fall in our path, because certainly that is the Father's good pleasure. And so we thank God. We thank God for that kingdom jab that provokes each of us to come on and wake up and arise to our greatest level of consciousness. Dr. Jones, we are talking about something that I've heard you talk about on your own ministry stream, which is the midday moment that takes place 12-ish each day. if I can say it that way. And so, but you've been nailing it though. You've been nailing it though. And so I've heard you actually talk about this this topic of recovery and how recovery is for everyone. And to be quite frank, you are one of the ones that really inspired me to that level of consciousness. That recovery is not just about what society would term as an addict, right? And so why don't you take just a moment to just talk about that, and then we're going to bring our guests in, and we're just going to walk in the fullness of this topic and conversation on tonight.
Absolutely. You know, one of the sayings that we have in Kingdom that Dr. Pulley helps us to author is the fact that everybody is recovering from something. And that's why our networks are so important. You know, there's a stat that, depending on what research you look at, that says, for example, 1 in every 3rd child has been violated. 1 in every 3rd child. That's a lot of people when you just start counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a lot of people. And then the numbers kind of fluctuate again, depending on what stat you're looking at, or if you're looking at girls versus boys and so forth. But just in that general tone, a number of us have simply experienced trauma. And many times it's within our own family. And so our networks become very important, whether that's a social network, a spiritual network, and sometimes even making sure that there's a professional network, that there's a professional person within that midst, because we are all experiencing one trauma or another, or healing from one experience or another. It's just a part of the human experience to evolve. That's not even trying to be judgmental to say you're bad, and that's bad, and that's bad. It is a part of our human experience to evolve into the consciousness, into that higher consciousness of who we are, the Christ consciousness, as we like to say in Kingdom. And so all of this comes together to help us evolve. My father has a saying, my natural father has a saying, nothing comes to destroy me, but to pull me up, push me out, and position me. And so the networks that we have, they're designed to help pull us up and push us out and position us. And that is everybody, whether you have, experienced professional therapy or not. And I'll just say this last thing, and then I'll turn it back over so we can get a chance to chat with our guests. I was meeting with some teenagers yesterday, and of the 4 teenagers, each of them is seeing a therapist. And I said, good job. Good job. For you to be exposed to healthy conversations right now is amazing. It's almost as if, every now and then we need to see a therapist like we see a dentist. Just get a little checkup. But we're all recovering from something.
Absolutely, in one way or another. And so we're going to invite our distinguished and our esteemed guests into the conversation. And so we want to welcome them on tonight. We want to welcome Ronaldo Casadas here in Baltimore, Maryland. We also want to welcome Tyrell D. Moyd, and then we want to welcome Samuel Wesley Hairston IV. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Grace and peace.
Good evening, grace and peace.
Grace, mercy, and peace. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for joining Dr. Jones and I on tonight. And so we want to just go ahead and let the people know a little bit about who you are and why you're here with regards to tonight's topic. And so I'm going to ask each of you to simply introduce yourselves and share with our audience on tonight how it is that you relate to this topic of recovery, or what it means to you. And we want to thank everyone for being a part, and also for sharing it on your pages, so that others, like we said, this is a topic that impacts everyone, so that others might benefit from this great conversation tonight as well. And so Samuel Wesley Harrison IV, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us tonight about your relation to the topic on this evening?
All right. Well, greetings to everyone. Thank you, Bishop Hector, and good evening, Dr. Jones. This is my first time on Kingdom Conversations. I certainly have been a part of the background of Kingdom Conversations for quite a long time, and I have enjoyed every single topic. So this topic tonight is near and dear to my heart, entitled "Recovery is for Everyone." I am a overcoming, victorious, recovering addict. October 16th, 2020 will be 13 years of clean, serene, sober, and living a victorious life, a miraculous deliverance from a whole serious crack addiction that at the end was about somewhere about $1,000 a week habit of smoking crack. I ended at a bus stop on Pennsylvania Avenue where I lived in Forestville, Maryland, and my first and last meal was out of a McDonald's trash can. I had been preaching for many years and gave all of it up after a divorce and a serious bout with depression. I walked away from everything and met someone and got introduced to the drug lifestyle, and my addiction began and literally just took me down. When I thought that there was no bottom left, there was actually another bottom below that bottom that took me down further and further until October 2008, when I asked God for help, and God, doing what God does, got me help. And I never looked back from that day to this. So I'll stop there and let you introduce your other guests.
Well, congratulations. Welcome to the table. And we certainly celebrate such a triumphant story. And we get it. One of our members at Kingdom Covenant Ministry, Sean Pringle, I think I was told recently that he called it the basement to the bottom.
Yeah.
So there is the bottom. There is another bottom.
Yeah.
There is another level. There is another bottom. So we have learned through experiences such as this, and we appreciate you sharing that others might overcome. We also have with us Tyrell D. Moyd, just as overseer, helping as an overseer in the Church of Everlasting Kingdom. Tyrell D. Moyd is the senior elder at Kingdom Covenant Ministries. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me today. Greetings, Dr. Jones and the other panelists. Glad to be here. I am Tyrell Moyd. I am an individual living well with a mental health diagnosis and an ally for those in recovery from substance use disorder. My primary work today is I work in the recovery field or in behavioral health, where I specifically train those who are going out and serving specifically these communities. So from counselors to recovery coaches, helping prepare individuals, because with all of the stigma, with all of the labels that have been placed on individuals with mental health, specifically, the recovery I work with is mental health and substance use disorder. And with all of those labels, I want to make sure that those that are serving are not just serving, but to ensure that they're serving them well, because all of us deserves dignity when we're going through our process. Yeah. So it's important for me to make sure that my little part that I'm doing is planting the seeds of excellent service to the community.
You know, I have to tell you, I am making a serious note of what you just said, that all of us deserve dignity when going through our process. I think that is such a kingdom statement. And I think it's such a kingdom statement because, you know, all of us here on this platform are spiritual leaders in one way or another in ministry. And we know all too well people who have had their victory, yet have forgotten from whence they've come, as Big Mama would say. Yeah. And so now in comes the newcomer who is going through perhaps something very similar. And yet sometimes we fail to honor the dignity that they deserve because we covered them. And so that just really, that screams at me, not scream in the negative, but screams at me that that's something that we really have to uphold in kingdom, that every individual, Dr. Jones, that's really speaking to me, that every individual deserves the dignity of going through their process. And so thank you for being that type of ally. That's amazing. I'm gonna preach that, but thank you, thank you so much. And so we also have Ronaldo Casadas, also an elder from Kingdom Covenant Ministries. Good evening.
Good evening, Bishop. How's everybody doing?
We are blessed.
Amen. Good to see everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. For myself, I got clean and sober on January 2nd of 1990. So this January I celebrated 30 years of recovery. And for me, yes, thank you. My story was about getting clean and sober at a young age after growing up in a household that um, drinking and was a normal part of life. And so I understood that drinking responsibly meant that you didn't throw up when you drank, and you never ran out of booze. That was my definition. And so when I got clean and sober, what I later discovered was that even though I had doubts about my own recovery at such a young age, the gentleman who sponsored me, he was Caucasian and he had 12 years of sobriety, and he said to me that that young men of color were willing to listen to me and not listen to him because he was a old white man, is how he put it. And so he quickly identified that that I had my place in recovery, even though I didn't believe it. And so the one thing that he helped me was to focus on my recovery, to continue to work on my recovery, and then to look for those people who look like me when I came into recovery. And it turned out, you know, as he showed me as we spanned the room, that there weren't very many people who looked like me in the meetings of recovery. And he said often men of color are looked over because society has this stigma about who we are, and even if we're coming from this life of drug addiction and alcoholism, nobody wants anything to do with us. And so he helped me commit to looking for those people who look like me, and I focused on them when they came in, and I introduced them and myself to them and said, you know, if you think that you can't make it, I'm a testimony. And that would share my recovery time and day and how long I've been in recovery. And I got to watch other men of color and women of color gain sobriety in that way. And so now, since 30 years plus years of clean and sober life, I have a lot of friends in recovery who are people of color who I still remain friends with. And I thank my sponsor at that time for seeing something that I was unable to see and helping me focus on giving this message of recovery to other people of color.
That's awesome, and congratulations to you on such a milestone in your victory and in your process. Dr. Jones, we've heard these great stories. These are some very victorious kingdom men. What's turning in your wheelhouse of consciousness in this moment?
You know, certainly, as you mentioned it, that word dignity that came from Elder Moyd, I wrote that down just before you said it. And so that's resonating because often, and then Elder Ronaldo just spoke it again. He didn't use that word, but he just described it, that we tend not to give each other that honor of human dignity, regardless of who they are and what state they are in. And so it is really refreshing just to even hear this being reaffirmed, that there's a commitment in this conversation to honor people no matter what they are traveling through, because again, we all are recovering from something. And the only difference between those that tell their stories and those that don't is we don't know the story. We just don't know the others. And so that's the only difference. So that's standing out to me. It's also standing out to me that, you know, I took a class in graduate school called Family Systems Therapy. And there's one thing that is consistent in life: change. And I heard it as Overseer Harrison talked about his journey and the change that took place. And I heard Elder Ronaldo and so forth. And so the question that I pose is just asking you to just elaborate a little more on, you know, the change in life and how it is important for individuals to be prepared and have resource to deal with the changes in life so that we can perhaps make some choices, not just prior to some of the addictions you've talked about, but even once you've begun the recovery process, how do we stay in that process?
So you want me to jump in with that, Bishop Hector?
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Jones, and I know the guys. Congratulations, Ronaldo, on 30 years. I know both of Ronaldo and Terrell so well, and our lives are intertwined so much. I was thinking about what you said, Dr. Jones, and that prior to the start of my addiction, I didn't know anything about depression. Now, I had been in therapy in and out for various things, but I didn't know anything about depression. I didn't have any connectivity to this was me in a depressed state. And I certainly didn't know anything about self-care in the context of how to help myself. One of the analogies I remember a therapist used was trying to juggle all the plates around all at the same time, and eventually something's going to come crashing down. I felt like my whole life was just crashing down all at once. I was pastoring a church, the Victorious Church in Camp Springs, Maryland, when all of this happened. And I remembered that the weather caused the roof to cave in into the sanctuary. And I remember saying one time, that's exactly how I feel. And I didn't know how to ask for help. And so that opened the door for addiction to come in. Now, since we're on the other side of this, and I think we want to really focus on the other side of it, is that the change process began for me the day I asked for help. I, number one, admitted that I needed help. I admitted that I had a problem and I needed help. Once I took that first initial step, the universe just began to do everything that was necessary to get me to where I am today. It's a long process, but working in that change atmosphere, I've learned and understood the importance, the vital importance of spiritual connectivity. Number one, it is my foundation for success or recovery, is my spiritual connectivity. You can call it God, you can call it whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to argue with anybody about pronouns and names and he, she, it, they. I don't get into any of that. What I want to know is that you have a spiritual connection. My spiritual connection is certainly that of Christianity, the Holy Scriptures, local church attendance, and certainly the Church of the Everlasting Kingdom. Everybody who knows me knows that. And my spiritual connection takes me into a network of people in the recovery community, as well as constantly giving of myself with no strings attached to it. All of these things, self-care, spiritual connectivity, service work, all of these things are the foundations for successful recovery in my life. But managing that change, and life has changed over these 13 years. There have been massive changes throughout them, but those foundations have been what has helped me. Those have been the foundations along every step of the way for me and helped me manage any aspect of life that life may throw at me, as long as I maintain that spiritual connectivity and the connectivity to my network and constantly giving from, as we say, from my saucer and not my cup, constantly giving out of my overflow. I've learned how to live a victorious and healthy and prosperous life.
And that is awesome. And I want to encourage each of you that we can really do any side of the story. The topic is recovery, but we know that something had to get us to that place.
Yes.
So, we certainly want to, we can appeal and connect to our audience and those that will watch live and as well as the playback. We're able to talk on any side of this process that you think might be of benefit to this conversation. So, so please don't worry about limiting yourself to just one part. We're going to see it tonight as a continuum. September is National Recovery Month, and so we're going to be on this parking lot the entire month because we really uphold this as a topic of importance. Elder Moore, I've seen you thinking. I've seen you taking notes. Talk to us. What's on your mind as it pertains to the topic, sir?
Moment, of course, when Dr. Jones started mentioning change, I said, see, this is why I didn't want to be on here tonight. Because, of course, on Thursday Night Conversations, today I sent Bishop the curriculum for the next few Thursday Night Conversations as we talk about recovery We cannot talk about that recovery process with not talking about those stages of change. So, Reverend Elder Overseer Sam and Elder Ronaldo, can speak to it from their lived experience in a different way. But there are those changes that individuals go through when they're going from, I'm not even thinking about making a change, to now I'm starting to have some thoughts that maybe something needs to happen. Overseer talked about hitting that bottom. But what was it that got us, that prompted us to that mindset that something needs to shift? So those changes that we go through start off in our mind. So again, having that lived experience, I'll let them talk about that. But when I think of that as an ally, it is important for us to understand those stages of change so that I know how to support you when I see you having those negative thoughts and those things. So how do I support you from going from, now that I'm thinking about it, now how do I start to put some plans into place? Now that I had some plans, how do I start to put some actions to that? So how do we support individuals through the change so that they could have a successful recovery journey? So that's why I started smiling. Y'all stealing my stuff.
The conversation continues. It's one conversation, and the conversation just continues. And so we love it. We love it. It's about divine nature and order. Elder Casadas, change. Talk to us.
Well, some of you already know me from KCM and some of the writings I do with the Morning Luminaries. And I think the toughest thing for me to openly share in the luminary postings was what really brought me into recovery. I was stationed in the military. I was overseas, and I'd reached this low point of my life. I was dealing with a lot of depression, and prior to that, I had experiences in my life that I had a resentment with God, and so I stopped, turning to God. I actually turned my back on God, and I reached this point in my life that my life had gotten so miserable that I was convinced that my only way, my only solution to the misery that I was living with was to end my own life. And so I remember I was in my moment, and I was really intoxicated, and I reached out and I did a desperate plea, and I said, I know what I'm about to do, and I'm just asking for your forgiveness. Whatever that looks like, that's you. That's on you. If you really exist, I'm asking that you forgive me for what I'm about to do to myself. And you want to talk about a shift? My whole life turned around. I got arrested for drunk and disorderly. They took my clearance away. They took my weapon away, and my whole life began to shift. Not in the way that I anticipated, but what ended up happening is I ended up in the rooms of recovery. And at that moment, what happened for me is I came in contact with people in recovery who had this energy about them. When you see people who are walking with God, there's this glow that comes from within that you can't duplicate it no matter what you do unless you have that connection with God. And I was drawn to those people, and they openly shared how they got there and what they did. And I would like, but that doesn't apply to me. But ultimately, what I realized is, as much as I didn't really want to explore the God option, I couldn't resist the attraction that I had. And so I started to listen, and I started to apply those things that they were doing. And ultimately, I found me a sponsor who was really connected with the God concept. And whether I liked it or not, it gave me assignments that were related to connecting with God. Having me do the simplest assignments about writing, and instead of always being in the negative, asked me to look. One of the assignments, he said, I want you to do a God sighting for the next 2 weeks. And instead of talking about what's missing, I want you to see where you see God throughout your life. And at first it was difficult because I was not used to looking for God. And eventually I began to see God. And I used to say God was manifesting in different ways in my life, but God had always been there. I had just not looked. and I was taking for granted what was there. And so what began to happen is I was beginning to notice God throughout my life. And then I was noticing God working in people's lives. And, what kept me coming back is that I realized that those people with long-term sobriety had no reason, or so I thought, to still be in the recovering meetings, but they were returning what was freely given to them. And so that became part of my commitment, was to give back what was freely given to me, and then discovering that other people of color need to know from people like me, other people of color, that recovery is possible. And so, and then last but not least, my sponsor had me sponsor other people at 6 months of recovery. And he would say, you can't take them any further than you are. So that means you need to get to work. And so my work consisted of doing the steps, the 12 steps, going to therapy, and working with a sponsor, working with the steps, going to meetings, participating in meetings, sharing at meetings, speaking at meetings. And all of those things contributed to me returning every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day to meetings. Weekends, it was not uncommon for me to go to the 2 to 3 meetings a day. And some days I was doing a lunchtime meeting at work, and then after work I was doing a meeting. And I realized that in order for me to do recovery, I had to replace my alcohol use with something else. I couldn't just take it out and leave an empty space, because ultimately what would happen is I could only replace it with what I knew. And that's how I kept relapsing at the beginning. But once I grasped that concept, as long as I continue to replace my drug of choice with the meetings and interacting with people, I put more time between me and my last drink, which put me further and further away from relapsing. And next thing I know, now I've had 30 years of recovery. And so those are some of the things that made a major impact on my life. I do want to share openly that depression has come back on more than one occasion. The suicidal ideology has returned, and I have at the same time returned back and sought the help of therapy, psychologists, and doing assignments there, and then also really connecting with my church also. And I discovered the more I was in contact with God, the less and less that depression and those suicidal tendencies, they no longer had power over me. And I heard this one time, and I'll close with this, but somebody said, suicide's knocking on my door. And for the first time I was like, Jesus, can you get that for me? And that has been powerful for me, because I used to answer that door and I would say, I'm fighting depression, and it's not for me to fight. It's for me to turn it over. And I haven't had to battle depression since then, since I've learned that approach. And so again, I thank you for kingdom teachings and in the kingdom ways, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. And so I thank you for this opportunity, for being here today.
And I was thinking, I switched over. I realized my other Bluetooth was dying on me, so forgive me for the shift change there. But I was thinking, as Ronaldo was sharing about that addiction is, the manifestation of addiction is the symptom of an underlying problem. And most people enter into addiction because they have not dealt with the root causes of depression, trauma, or whatever it is. And the beauty of treatment is that it is designed to get to the root of the issue, because treatment is designed to treat the whole man, the mental, the spiritual, the physical, and which is why most people, the majority of people who have successful recovery, has gone through some type of treatment modality. But it is there where you get faced with the reality of my root causes. Whether, like I said, was a sexual trauma, a death, or whatever the traumatic experience might have been, or multitude of traumatic experiences, it's incumbent upon us to be willing to deal with the root issues. Until you deal with the root issues, I heard Ray talk about the fact that depression came back. suicidal ideations came back. All of those things came back, and he did the right thing. He went back and got more help. People who resist therapy, people who resist the treatment modality struggle a lot harder overcoming addictions because they're not because treatment forces you to face the person in the mirror and everything that's attached to that person. And unless you're willing to face yourself and face your issues, you're never going to find the victory you absolutely want to live. I just don't believe that nobody consciously wants to be addicted to crack and alcohol or heroin or crystal meth or opioids. I just don't believe that. People do that to mask, and they feel like this is going to help me stop hurting, when in fact it is doing the exact opposite. But the deception is, if I don't deal with it, it'll go away. And that is absolutely not going to be the case. And we have to deal with our issues. And we have to find ways to do. That's all about that change agent that Dr. Jones was asking us about. And Terrell, being a professional who helps with the training of this, I know he encourages this because I know his modality. And these are things that are just foundational to successful recovery.
Absolutely. This is, Dr. Jones, this is an amazing conversation that we're having tonight. And I can share in open transparency, even my own evolution as a leader in ministry. I can remember, gosh, years ago, when I was a part of a ministry in East Baltimore. And at that time, I was more on the church executive administration part of ministry in that season of my life. And we had been having AA meetings at the church on Saturdays. And it was starting to conflict with the church schedule, if you will. And so certain activities and events couldn't be held at the church because we're hosting AA. And so this one particular Saturday, I had them call AA and say, well, y'all can't do it here. And I don't remember for whatever reason, but we need the church for this Saturday, for example. And I remember being there at the church, and the conviction, I cannot tell you the conviction that fell upon me. I didn't really know I didn't really understand the system and how this worked. And so at that time, I guess I didn't realize that there's a publication of some sort where the meetings are listed in the publication. And
a meeting list.
Like, I'm ready to cry right now. And the location and the time of this meeting. Yes. And so I'm here at the church, and people are knocking at the door looking for this meeting over and over again, knocking at the door looking for this meeting. And you could see the desperation in their face, and you could see the need in their face, and you could see the intentionality in their face that they're coming to this meeting, not to bake brownies and cupcakes, but they're here because they need this meeting, and I have canceled the meeting. Dr. Jones, go ahead and speak on that.
Yes. Let me say, beautiful to see that lesson in motion in terms of your awareness, but also don't be disheartened, because even within that, there's still another lesson. And let me explain that. I had the privilege and honor of supporting a dear colleague of mine as they were entering treatment. And we followed that list and went to find a meeting, and only to find out that meeting had been canceled. But this is what happened in that moment. They got a chance to also experience their desperation to be at a meeting. So you know what we did? We went back to the list and we found another meeting. And so it's great for us that don't know that experience and what that meeting means. It is great for us to come into that awareness, and it is also great for the others to understand that happens. Things happen because you know what? Life does not necessarily revolve around your one day trying to get to that meeting. You have to bring life to you by seeking out that meeting. And so I'm speaking, of course, through the lens of my colleague. I also desire to add to that, not only did they become desperate, and they did find a meeting. Okay. Not only did, and I see Overseer Sam shaking his head, so he's a witness to this process. The other thing that I did was I went to the Al-Anon meeting, as a supporter. And I went to that first meeting because I desired to help a friend. And that's why I went to the meeting. But let me tell you, I went back to the meeting several times, not for my friend, but for me. Because even though I had previously experienced therapy after a traumatic moment in my life, I still saw in that one meeting, one of the things they say is, don't do for someone what they can do for themselves. And I realized that I was still living out my childhood trauma, trying to do for others what they were doing for themselves. With that, I desire to see if there's a moment that we can spend to just talk to individuals, talk to people that have a heart and a compassion to see their loved ones get into recovery. But you can't force somebody into that process. How do we hold the consciousness of them getting to the point of recovery, knowing that we can't do it for them? How can we help and not hinder?
I'm gonna let Ray hit this first, Terrell, because y'all know I'm real raw, and I'll go right in with something more. So I'm gonna let you guys take this first.
Elder Tyrell, talk about that for a moment, please.
Recognizing that, so Johann Hari, who speaks extensively on mental health and recovery, talks about the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So it's important for us who are supporting those individuals just to be connected to them, because the seeds we plant today can, spring forth tomorrow. So it's not easy as a loved one. So I always tell those who come to our training, this ain't for chumps. Sometimes, this ain't for chumps. So because we have to sometimes be thick-skinned, we have to say no and cry, when we want to give them some money and we know they're going to do sometimes. So we have to sometimes sort of do the tough love and, not let the person back in the house. And because we understand at the end of the day, we're responsible to them, but we're not responsible for them, that their recovery has to be their decision. So I'm here as a supporter. I'm here to stay connected to you, because what has been lost, as Elder Sam was mentioning earlier, as he was talking, I thought about, a lot of what has happened, be it trauma, those past hurts, has left us disconnected, disconnected from love, disconnected from hope, disconnected from God, so what my job is to now get you connected. So if I can stay connected to you, I can trust God is going to do his end, do what he's going to do. But my job is here to support you. And sometimes my support, may not look like what I want it to look like. So, because we talk about multiple pathways, and so I might be encouraging you, maybe get into treatment, but maybe treatment for you is not the right pathway. So I have to become disconnected from my own thoughts, but connected to you in the sense that I'm looking for what it is that you need. What is it that's going to help you get to the next level versus what my idea of what recovery should look like. Because the recovery process, I've worked with many individuals. Some said, I got it. And, I've been running for Jesus, for a long, long time, and I ain't got tired yet. And then there's others who I started and I stopped, and I started and I went a little further. So we know that not everybody's process is going to look the same. So ours as supporters, ours as allies and as family members is to trust the process, whatever that person's process looks like.
You gotta trust the process. Absolutely. Elder Casales, anything that you wanted to add to that?
What I learned that the best way to be able to help and not hinder is come from a place of compassion, a place from experience. One of the biggest turnoffs to anybody who's dealing with addiction or alcoholism is to hear somebody judge them. Um, and so if I come in contact with a family member, a friend, or a loved one that is dealing with addiction or alcoholism, I come from a place of this has been my experience. These were my struggles. And these have been my struggles, and this is how I move forward. I don't sugarcoat it. I know that sometimes that this conversation that we're having may be the last conversation that you may have, because in my road to recovery, I've witnessed where I saw somebody for the last time, or somebody failed to speak to somebody else, and they committed suicide. They took their own lives. And so I have to keep in mind that every time I have make contact with somebody who's dealing with addiction or dealing with alcoholism or whatever it is that they're dealing with, that I just have to be loving, compassionate, and share from a place where there's no judgment, but I have to be direct. And what I get from that is a level of respect that people are willing to listen. I don't judge you, but I just share these are the things that I struggle with. And if I talk about, hey, I was in that place of suicide, I was in the place of ending my own life, people want to hear, hey, it's not what people see is the end result. And when I tell them the struggles that I have, they'll say, that's not possible. That's not who I see. Well, yes, that's true. But I had to come from somewhere. And the only reason why I'm in the rooms of recovery was that it got bad enough. And this is what I've done. And so I just keep it as real as possible. And I don't sugarcoat it. And last but not least, I always welcome them. I'm like, hey, I'm going to a meeting. You're welcome to come and join me. Or let's go to a meeting now, because there's no better time than the present. And that has often happened for me, where I'm like, there's a meeting anytime, any time of the day. And if we decide we're going to go now, we're going to find something. Even if we find the last 5 minutes, there'll be another meeting in another, half hour to an hour. And it's always amazing when we're able to do that. So yes, staying connected is really a good way to do that, and ultimately just being real about who we are and where we come from, and not lie or sugarcoat anything.
I wanted to say also that there is a difference in compassion and compromise. There is a difference in being an ally and an enabler. And oftentimes, those people that love the suffering addict the most confuse compassion and compromise. They confuse being an ally versus being an enabler, and oftentimes become the enabler and not the ally. And it is a tragic, tough situation for any person who is affected by addiction, trying to navigate the difference between an ally and an enabler, because our heart wants the person to get better, and our compassion causes us to do things to them that we think in our mind, I'm helping them, when in fact you're simply enabling them. And here's some practical examples that I've learned. I had a recent situation where I was helping someone get into recovery. I too worked in the recovery field. I went back to the treatment centers that I got clean at, and went back to work for them for several years. And so I've learned some things. I got constant training, the whole 9 yards. But one of the things I learned was, when somebody wants help, you talk about the meeting list, meetings being open. People who want help are intentional, and they really don't need a lot of push. When you reach the end of your road, trust me when I tell you, you'll get the help you need. You just got to get to the end of your road. But what happens is, when this young person wanted recovery, I said to the people who called me for help, give that person my phone number and tell them to call me. Don't call me for them. Let them call me. Let them put forth the initiation. You cannot help somebody who is not ready for help. And you try to push them to go to treatment, schedule a therapy session, if that person does not do the work on their own, 9 out of the 10, they're not going to succeed with it. And you'll frustrate all of your efforts trying to, in the name of trying to help them out of love for them. And trust me, so many parents, my poor mother will testify to all this. She celebrates 13 years of recovery, as I am too, because she recovered from me. And so she enabled me for years, you know, and I manipulated that enabling, you know, until finally, you know, she had reached her end. She couldn't do no more enabling because I had abused all of it. And so it's important that people who are affected by addictions understand the difference in enabling and being an ally. An ally will say to them, here's the phone number for addiction, or you can't stay here and continue to do this. That's what tough love is, all that Ronaldo was talking about. That's what tough love is all about. And one of my dear friends, I can call his name, Dr. Darrell Pulley, he walked with me through my entire addiction process. I'm telling you, I can say this without hesitation. He is the one person, the only person who knew me before addiction, knew me during addiction, and knows me after addiction. And he has been my dearest friend from day one to this very day. He never disowned me in my addiction. Y'all were talking about that love and compassion and dignity and respect. Let me tell you, there were plenty of days when I was getting high that the phone rang and it was Dr. Darrell Pulley on the other end. It was my friend Darrell on the other end. Let me say it that way. And I couldn't even answer the phone because I was getting high. But he never stopped calling me. Never did. He never gave me a dime. He never gave me a dime. I asked him for money and he would never give it to me. But he never stopped loving me. He never stopped praying for me. He never stopped being my friend. When I finally wanted help, he was one of the people who got me help. When I came out of treatment and got back into society, he was the first person that reached out to me. And from the biblical principle, he began to pour in the oil and the wine. And so he was always an ally, and he was never an enabler. And if you love them, and if you love them the way you say you love them, you have to make the tough choices sometimes to cut them off, to hopefully bring them to a point of awakening.
That's amazing, and that's a powerful testimony of a spiritual leader walking someone through their process and just being there by just being there, and that's amazing. September is we've said it before, is identified as being National Recovery Month. And we know that September is also, you know, that back to school season. Dr. Jones, you're a veteran educator. I'm a veteran educator. Elder Moyd, what would you say with regards to the importance of education as it relates or pertains to recovery?
So as actually, when Elder Ronaldo was talking, it had come to me that I did not mention education. So for those who are supporters, just as Dr. Jones had mentioned, you know, going to Al-Anon, educate yourself, you know, about the disease. Educate yourself. That education is important because the more you know, it will begin to shift even how you interact with the individual. So often we have looked at, especially when it comes to the addiction with the mental health, okay, you know, some chemical unbalance, we can accept that. But with the addiction, we look at it as a moral dilemma versus it being a disease. So, you know, if somebody's suffering from cancer, we don't just put them out. We don't just throw them to the side if they're having other disease issues, but let the addict have a relapse. You know, oh, they just didn't, you know, we all the things that we say. So the more we educate ourselves about the disease, and not that something is wrong with the person, something is bad with the person, I think we will help serve the community better. And for those who are going through addiction, one of the things that Sean Pringle mentions is in his own recovery process, and he gave me permission to share his story. I'm not doing it without permission. But even as he was going through his own process, he says one of the pivotal points for him is himself educating himself about his disease. When he knew what was going on, oh, wait a minute. a bit, if you don't mind me saying, the devil can't trick me with this one, because I know, and the devil being my mind, those thoughts, those outward. So yeah, okay. But I just, we can't get tricked when we're educated. It's harder to trick us, when we begin to know and begin to learn about what's going on with us, with our family, with those we're serving.
And Mr. Hector,
that we have tonight that are coming up and that are coming out, and I celebrate each of you, and I want to encourage each of you by knowing that Dr. Jones and I are going to automatically invite you back, because I know there's so much over here. I see you.
Yeah.
I'm
talking
my own microphone, and so I get it. I understand. And so what I want you to know is that we're gonna have y'all back, because it's really important a topic, and I too have so much to say about this, because I'm learning and grasping so much. When I heard you say that when it came knocking at your door, and you said, Jesus, go ahead and hit that door.
I love that. I'm like,
okay, the sermons I am getting tonight, let Jesus hit the door. Let the way shower show them. I absolutely love it. I love it. And so I think that it is really important. So I want to say that I have a challenge for everyone on the line tonight, and I have a challenge for our audience as well. I do desire to publicly and openly, on behalf of Dr. Pulley, myself, and Dr. Jones, I want to invite anyone who is willing and has the time to come back next week. Now, there was a stipulation to your comeback. When you come back, I desire each of you, Overseer Sam, I desire that you bring an overcomer as a guest with you. Elder Tyrell, I desire that you bring a coworker or a colleague in the field of recovery with you. Elder Casadas, I desire that you bring one of your inspirational luminaries with you, that you might share from many of your writings. That's going to be hard, because you write about recovery almost every day of the week. You've been doing so for well over a year now. And so I invite you to bring a reading with you. And then Dr. Jones, I certainly want to invite you to come back with us, along with Dr. Pulley, who we know also works well in the mental health field. Now, to our listening audience, our viewing audience, actually, I desire that each of you take the Kingdom Challenge of inviting someone it's a two-part. Number one, share tonight's segment on your page, because we've already identified the fact that recovery is for everyone. The topic will not change. And then I invite you or challenge you to bring someone to the conversation on next week. Now, next week, I'm also challenging the producer. I'm challenging everybody connected to this segment, because I'm feeling thus inclined, as we say. I'm challenging our producer. And so next week, I want the conversation to be engaging. And so if you have questions, if you have thoughts, and our producer will be popping them up throughout the entire broadcast, so that you can feel as inclusive in this conversation as we do. We'll be answering questions. We will be, talking on the topics that you feel pertain to you. And then finally, we have a Kingdom Conversations page, a Facebook page. And so if you know of resources, we want you to go and we want you to put it on the page. If you want to put your face with your testimony about your process of being in recovery, we want you to put it on the page. And if nobody else responds to you, I commit to, and I challenge the people with me on tonight, we're going to visit that page and we will respond to you. And we want you to we want to make it clear tonight, this is not about you joining our church. This is not about you getting saved. This is not about you confessing the Lord Jesus as your personal Savior. Of course, we want all of that. But for this particular purpose, this is about recovery and encouraging other individuals to recover. You heard Overseer Sam say it. His mother was in recovery because she had to put up with everything that he was going through in the recovery. So I'm sure that spoke to a lot of us. And so we want to continue in this important conversation. And then Dr. Jones, I want to share with you in particular, because I know that you will help me, you and Overseer Sam, because we just had a class on Saturday morning. And so I'm just so glad that I can just make assignments and then just delegate them, because because we are the kingdom. Praise the Lord. Because we are the church of the everlasting kingdom, because we are Kingdom Covenant Network. when we hear the fact, if we're going to say that recovery is for everyone, then there must be a recovery ministry under our umbrella. If it impacts everyone, and we know that the kingdom has that type of global impact, and we want to have that type of global impact, then there must be a kingdom recovery. And I believe, Overseer Sam, I just gave you that assignment on Saturday, did I not?
Yes, you did, Bishop.
So thus this becomes all the more important and validated. And so I know I've said a mouthful there. Dr. Jones, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna let you come on in and share a moment of consciousness with us.
Let me see. Am I unmuted now? Very good. I'm delighted that the conversation is continuing, because this is one of those things that we don't talk about enough. You know, I've been in church all of my life, and like many of us, and we were really good at talking in church about some things and never mention anything else. I never heard messages, for example, encouraging people that are experiencing domestic violence and talking to people that have a history of abuse and need to recover from abuse, need to recover as the abuser, and need to recover as the one who has been abused. And so all of these, as Overseer Sam was talking about, a lot of these are root causes as to why we journey into either addiction with substances, or addiction with shopping, addiction with eating, addiction with sexual partners. So as we said, we are all overcoming or recovering from something. We're all recovering from these different things that we've used to medicate ourselves, to falsely heal ourselves. And so this conversation is important, because this is not what every spiritual Sunday service is delivering to individuals. And not saying that every service has, but these are conversations that we did not have in Sunday school. We didn't have these conversations on Sunday mornings. And so if Monday night is going to be it, and we're making that a former part of our ministry as Church of the Everlasting Kingdom, we are doing exactly what we have been called to do, and exactly what individuals are crying out for. We are the way shores. We are the way shores. And so it's incumbent upon us to host these conversations. I think you're muted, Bishop. Bishop.
I want to make it clear that, again, recovery is for everyone, and none of us are excluded. And listen, it is closer to you than you think it is. It is much closer. You know, we say that thing that every family got one. You know, but when it comes to recovery, it's the whole family. And I think that the sooner that we come into that level of consciousness and cognizance and awareness, the better off we all will be. And so this really becomes imperative. I can tell you, I served years. I have colleagues in ministry who I have served years with. And have you ever known someone where it was something, but you just couldn't put your finger on it?
Mm-hmm.
It's something, but I just can't put my finger on it. And years worked closely with colleagues in ministry. Mm-hmm. I mean, close. Mm-hmm. And then for them to years later say, I have an addiction. I have a struggle.
Right.
And you're blown away, because it makes you realize that, what does that say for me? Because no time for judgment. That's not the time to judge. What does that say for me, that I consider myself to be so close to this individual, yet had such a significant struggle, and I did not have an awareness?
I can appreciate what you're saying. And I add to that, not only are we often next door to this experience, you know, we have this saying in the financial conversations that the average person is one paycheck away from being homeless. Mm-hmm. Most of us are one paycheck away from being addicted to a substance. We're one experience away. We're one trigger away. So this conversation is important, because not only are we helping people to heal who have experienced the substance addiction, we're helping individuals that are just one trigger away We are helping individuals.
Elder Moy, you have some resources that you want to share with us on tonight.
Yes. So this is local, and I love the idea, as you saying, posting these in the room so that everyone would have access to it. So thank you for doing that. But for those who may be struggling in at least in the Baltimore area, there is the Here to Help hotline, which is 410-433-5175. Again, 410-433-5175. And it's a hotline, it's a warm line. If you need crisis, they will connect you to a crisis helpline. But this is really for you to get support, for you to get connected with treatment. If you're a family member and you want to get connected with Al-Anon groups, so that is where you would call to get you connected with the recovery community. We're here to help.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And if you know someone who is dealing with something, again, and we don't want you to wait till next week. Again, hit us on that page. And we are resourceful people, each of us. And we will, we would not dare want you have to wait till next Monday to get some help. So, hit us on that page, hit us in our inbox, and, we will do everything we can to get you connected to the right resource, because I love it. Just as Jesus is our way shower, it's important that we show you the way and not get in the way. And so we want to show you the way to the right resource, understanding that, this is not our moment to flex and to try to be a superhero, but it's important to get you to the right and the proper resources. So what I'm going to do, gentlemen, and this is going to be hard because this is a passionate conversation and topic, I'm going to allow each of you 30 seconds for closing on tonight, and you can talk about whatever you want to as pertains to the topic, and then I'm going to give our guest host, Dr. Davina Jones, the closing words before I in the broadcast of this evening. So, Elder Casales, thank you for coming. Why don't you give us anything that you might want to say in closing for tonight? And again, you're welcome back for the rest of this series.
Thank you, Bishop. Again, it's an honor to be here tonight. For starters, I at least wanted to share the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That's 1-800-273-8255. Again, the number is 1-800-273-8255. I think about that moment when I reached out and I asked God to forgive me for what I was about to do, and I never anticipated that moment was going to be that turning point in my life. That I heard somebody say that we're all the Christ. We're all, in that case, I was dead, and I was I was in that tomb, and then that inner Christ in me was waiting to be brought from the grave, and I was the risen Christ waiting to come to. And that moment that I asked God forgiveness, look at where it's brought me here today. And who would have anticipated 30 years of recovery, and who would have anticipated 30 more years of life? And I plan to end my life, and it's resurfaced on more than one occasion. And last but not least, I have been able to overcome it because of those who have walked before me and showed me how to do this. And last but not least, other addictions have showed up as a result of that. They were underlying, they were exposed, and I've got to deal with them. And it's nice living a life without having to be ruled by those addictions anymore. And I'm grateful to be here. And if God did it for me, he can do it for you. Amen.
Well, amen. Over to Samuel Wesley Hairston.
30 seconds. Bishop Hector, thank you for making this a safe place for people like me to come and share. That being said, I also want to offer a resource, NA.org, Narcoticsanonymous.org. NA.org is a worldwide network, literally around the globe. The sayings of NA says that any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way of life. And so I want to invite you to go to na.org. Also, I want to say in this closing message, I am a preacher. I am a preacher. I am a preacher. I was a pastor of a church when I was addicted to crack. I gave up my entire life and ministry that I knew and went and followed a lifestyle of drug addiction and everything that goes along with it. And God, the great God that I serve, brought me out of the horrible pit, the muck and the miry clay, and placed my feet back on that rock, restored me to ministry. And so if you are out there in ministry, I want you to know that I'm here for you. We are here for you. Kingdom Conversations is a safe place for you, my brother and my sister, to come and get the help that you need without judgment and all full of compassion. And so if I can overcome, if I can fall and get back up and live a victorious life, I'm telling you, preacher, teacher, apostle, bishop, pastor, prophet, evangelist, teacher, whoever you are, I'm telling you that God can restore you as well. There is no pit so deep that he is not deeper still, were the words of one of the great Holocaust emancipators by the name of Corrie ten Boom. And I leave you with that.
Amen. Elder Tyrell D. Moyd.
So I leave you all just with the theme for this year's Recovery Month is Join the Voices of Recovery, Celebrating Connections.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be a part of this, and we invite you all back here. And a shameless plug also for Thursday Night Conversations, where we will be continuing the conversation on recovery. So we want you to be a part. We need your voices so that we can lift the stigma. So join the Voices of Recovery. Stay connected.
Dr. Davina.
So my final comments are wrapped in truth, the truth that we practice in Kingdom, which is that each of us, our spirit is perfect, whole, and complete. And it is the soul part of us that's seeking the healing, that's seeking the answers, that's seeking recovery, so that we can finally come and line up with the truth of our spirit, that we are truly made in the image of God. And God never leaves us, never forsakes us, never.
That is absolutely awesome. Listen, this is a continuum. This conversation continues, like Elder Moyd say. Thursday Night Conversations. We'll be right back. We'll be talking about this, and we will on Sundays. I'm in a September series right now, Dr. Jones, a 12-step system for Kingdom Recovery, and so we invite you. And it's not a shameless plug. It's just a plug. But we want you to be exposed to these kingdom principles as we spread the gospel and the message of the kingdom. So again, to all of you, Dr. Jones, Overseer Harrison, Elder Moyd, Elder Casadas, thank you so much for being a part of this real talk about a relevant topic. And so I want to even challenge even our clergy that's on the line. If you want to get involved as we develop this ministry for Kingdom Recovery, hit me up. Let me know you're available. Let me know you're interested, so that we can get Kingdom support for this great work. On behalf of Dr. Pulley and myself, we absolutely love you. We thank you and we bless you. Thank you for joining us on tonight. Everyone have a great evening. Man,
love you.
Sanitizers and 6 feet. It's all good.
Love.